A sealed door in the Prince of Darkness's mansion was finally cracked open after 4 decades of silence. And what investigators found inside wasn't just dust. It was a terrifying, forgotten history. For 40 years, rumors swirled about a hidden room in Ozzy Osbourne's estate. And today, we break the seal to reveal the chilling, priceless, and bizarre contents buried beneath the madness. We all know the stories of the bats, the doves, the ants, and the absolute chaos that followed John Michael Osbourne wherever he went. He is the godfather of heavy metal, a man who lived 1,000 lives and somehow survived them all. But while the world was watching the chaos on stage, something else was happening in the shadows. Something was being collected. For years, whispers circulated among the roadies, the groupies, and the inner circle of the Osbourne camp about the Vault, a space in one of Ozzy's historic UK properties. Allegedly the spooky, Grade 2 listed welder's house in Buckinghamshire that had been sealed off and forgotten. Why was it sealed? Some said it contained items too controversial even for Ozzy, while others claimed it was simply lost to the fog of addiction, a time capsule created during a blackout in 1982 and never reopened. But the truth is far stranger than any rumor. This year, as part of massive renovations to modify the estate for Ozzy's battle with Parkinson's, a construction crew uncovered a section of the basement that didn't appear on the modern blueprints. Behind a false wall, shielded by decades of damp and darkness, lay a room that hadn't seen the light of day since the Diary of a Madman tour. When Sharon Osbourne gave the green light to bring down the wall, the crew expected dry rot and rats. But instead, they found a literal museum of heavy metal history and some things that defied explanation. Imagine the smell. That stagnant, heavy air of 1980s excess sealed airtight. As the first flashlight beams cut through the gloom, the sheer volume of the hoard became apparent, because this wasn't just a storage closet, it was a tomb of memories. The first things they pulled out were the flight cases. Heavy, iron-reinforced boxes that had traveled the world, containing stage outfits that hadn't been seen since the US Festival in '83. We're talking about the iconic fringed shirts, the custom-made boots with lifts, and shockingly, the original hand-stitched cloak from the Blizzard of Oz photo shoots. But these were just the surface-level finds, because as the team dug deeper, moving past the rotting velvet curtains and piles of discarded lyric sheets, they found the items that make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. You have to remember, in the early 80s, Ozzy wasn't just a rock star. He was a target, publicly named enemy number 1 for religious groups and the moral majority. And what do you do with the thousands of bizarre, threatening, and occult gifts sent to you by fans and haters alike? You lock them away. In a rotting wooden crate marked "Do Not Open," they found a collection of handmade voodoo dolls, some pinned with real hair, sent to Ozzy in 1981. Next to them were jars, sealed tight, containing things that looked like biological specimens. And without going into too much graphic detail, let's just say the bat incident inspired some fans to send their own tributes in formaldehyde. Why keep them? Perhaps Ozzy, in his superstitious state, feared that destroying them would release whatever bad mojo was attached, so they went into the basement for 40 years of bad energy, bottled up in the dark. But the occult oddities were nothing compared to what was found in the back corner of the room. A discovery that has music historians and hardcore fans hyperventilating. Stacked on a rusted metal shelf were rows of 2-inch master tapes. Now, usually, master tapes are kept in climate-controlled vaults by record labels, but in the chaos of the 80s, things went missing. Contracts were signed on napkins, and tapes were stolen or borrowed and never returned. Among the stack, labeled in faded marker, were reels simply titled Randy. For the uninitiated, Randy Rhoads was the guitar prodigy who helped launch Ozzy's solo career and died tragically in a plane crash in 1982. Since then, fans have analyzed every second of his recorded output and thought they had heard it all, but they were wrong. The basement contained what appears to be rehearsal tapes from the Diary of a Madman sessions, featuring raw, unfiltered audio of Randy and Ozzy working out the songs that would define a genre, including alternate solos, riffs that never made the album, and candid studio chatter between a young, Hungry Ozzy and his guitar hero. If these tapes are playable, and audio engineers are working on baking them right now to save the magnetic oxide, this is the heavy metal equivalent of finding a lost gospel, a window into the creative process of a genius who left us too soon. But it wasn't just music. There were videotapes too. U-matic cassettes, a format long dead. These weren't polished MTV productions. These were home movies. The original reality show filmed decades before. The Osbournes ever hit the airwaves, featuring footage of the family on the road, chaotic backstage parties, and moments of quiet vulnerability that contradict the madman persona. It's the missing link in the Osbourne legacy, proving that the family bond was the only thing keeping the train on the tracks. The most personal discovery, however, was a small, water-damaged leather notebook found tucked inside an old acoustic guitar case. Ozzy has always been open about his dyslexia and his struggles with writing, often relying on others to pen the lyrics. But this notebook was different. It was filled with drawings, sketch after sketch of demons, crosses, and stage designs scrawled in black ink, but interspersed with the drawings were frantic, handwritten notes that weren't lyrics. They were apologies. Phrases like, "I am sorry, Sharon," "I have to stop," and "the noise won't stop," dated from late 1989, reveal the mind of a man at absolute rock bottom. It wasn't the Prince of Darkness posturing for a magazine cover. It was a man terrified of his own demons, locking his thoughts away in a basement because he couldn't face them in the light. Finding this journal 40 years later changes the context of his survival and shows just how close we came to losing him, not just to death, but to total madness. And of course, it wouldn't be a rock star's basement without the excess. Buried under piles of old NME magazines was a literal fortune in forgotten assets, including custom jewelry commissioned for tours that was worn once and tossed aside, and a Rolex watch likely worth $50,000 today found stuffed inside a dirty gym sock. There were prototype merchandise items that never saw production, like action figures that looked too scary for kids and board games that made no sense, serving as a graveyard of failed business ventures. But the most shocking treasure was a painting. Leaning against the damp wall, covered in a sheet, was a large canvas, and when the renovators pulled the sheet back, they found a portrait, not of Ozzy, but by Ozzy. In his downtime, to keep his hands busy and away from the bottle, Ozzy had apparently taken up painting in the early 80s, a hobby he kept almost entirely secret. The painting is a surreal, distorted landscape, dark and brooding, but with a strange, childlike quality, and art critics who have seen photos of it say it's actually raw emotion on canvas, adding a whole new layer to the man we think of as the guy biting heads off bats.